Welcome everybody. Welcome to the greatest hour of Sunday morning. Alright, today we're going to be talking about William and Dorothy Carey. What happens when love gets in the way? Who has ever heard of William Carey? Raise your hand. Actually, a few of you. Okay. If you guys have ever been to a Christian college, a Christian university, or a seminary, a lot of places will have a William Carey University or William Carey School of Missions. And the reason why is William Carey is basically the father of modern missions. You guys live in San Diego, so you guys know, like, there's a famous bay in San Diego. It's called what bay? This is an M. Mission Bay, right? And then there's also like Mission Park and then Mission Beach and all that stuff. So you live in California, you know a lot of these are named Mission whatever. So you guys know why? The Spanish missions. The difference between modern missions and the Spanish missions is that there's been a lot of missions in history. So when we talk about like, so you know, the Spanish missions are Jesuits, right? The Jesuits are like the Marine Corps of the Catholic Church. The way the Roman Catholic Church, all right, and basically a lot of the Spanish did missions, because Spanish were a huge world power on the Roman Catholic Church. The way they did missions, basically, okay, Jesuits, go and then build this giant chapel thing, and then give people work, teach people how to read, and then we're gonna have a bunch of missions. And if you guys took this in elementary school, you guys know all the missions are 1 day's walk for each other, right? It was like 1 day or like 1 month, something like that. There's like a special distance between all the missions. And the reason for it is like that way of doing missions is basically saying like, we will bring God's kingdom, God's church to the people, and then we'll basically make them like us. So that's why you see a lot of like, when the Indians become Catholics, they start to wear Catholic garbs, things like that. They basically have to start going to that church and basically become Catholic, stuff like that. That model gets money from the Catholic Church. That model tries to produce, at the end, more missions. More of those Catholic church buildings, things like that. Okay? Modern missions is different. The way modern missions is different is that William Carey basically started a model where it's like, it's not like the church, capital C church, or like Roman Catholic Church. We don't have this huge mission fund we're drawing from. What William Carey does is that he draws from, hey, do you believe in missions? Give money to this, and we'll do this. He basically draws from the congregation, right? Not just from the official church fund. What he also tries to do is, that at the end goal of his mission is not to create more William Carey Baptist churches. That end goal of modern missions is to create more Chinese churches, Indian churches, right? Latino churches that are not run by a white person, right? When you look at like the Catholic missions, they basically became like the Spanish. That's kind of what the Spanish are trying to do. That's why there's a lot of criticism of that, right? They're like basically trying to make you European. William Carey didn't try to do that. Modern missions is basically, if you're Chinese, have a Chinese church. That's why we have a Chinese church. I don't know if you guys ever thought about that, but that's kind of a crazy thing. Okay? So, William Carey, the father of modern missions, let's look at his life. Okay. Born in 1761 in Palisbury, 80 miles north of London. Son of a schoolmaster. He was also a deacon at the church. He loved to read books like Robinson Crusoe and the stories of James Cook. You guys know who James Cook is? George, tell me who James Cook is.
Isn't he like a boat captain?
He's an explorer.
Yeah.
Okay, he's an explorer. He basically explored a lot of the Pacific. So when we know about New Zealand, Australia, Hawaii, a lot of that is because of James Cook, right? And he's English. Worked as a shoemaker and a preacher. What's up?
Are you going to give us access to these slides?
Yes, these will be on datepad.com.
Okay.
Like all the great things. First impressions. All right, just from this list of stuff I told you. Income-wise, is he low, medium, or high income? Just say it. Do that loud. Low income. Okay, hopefully this shoemaker clues you out. I don't know how many rich shoemakers you know. Okay, low income. Education. Do you think it's low, medium, or high? Education. You said high? Medium? You over here?
Higher or medium?
Low. Low. Right. Back in 1761. If you're poor, guess what? You don't have education. All right. So what's important though, I mean, it could throw you off because he liked to read books, he was a schoolmaster and stuff like that. That could throw you off. The reason why we don't consider him as a stupid guy is because he spent a lot of time reading books. Right? He had a natural tendency to learn and to want to read and to get better. But his formal education, not even close. Not even close. Like, if you were in our church today, you'd be like, dude, this guy, like, I would maybe have him run lunch service, but he might be too stupid to figure that out. Like, I mean, he's like really low education. It's like, and I say that because my own dad, he didn't graduate high school. You know, and so my dad's a smart guy. Like, you talk to him, he's a smart guy, but you can tell his formal education is really low. That's William Carey. William Carey is basically as blue collar as you can get, a shoemaker. The equivalent of shoemaker today would be like landscaper. Right? That's basically the equivalent. Like, in terms of income, like how much work you do, it's like, hey, I mow yards. That's what his background is. All right. This is important. So we'll come back later. Love to read books like Robinson Crusoe. You guys know what Robinson Crusoe is? Wow, you guys are so young. Okay, Carmen, tell me what Robinson Crusoe is.
I never read it. It's an adventure book.
Okay, someone help me out. Who knows Robinson Crusoe?
Got stuck on an island.
But what kind of genre is Robinson Crusoe? What genre?
Diary?
Diary, but adventure, right? Adventure diary. Like, yeah, stuck on an island. He's like has to live off the island and all of this stuff. Swiss Family Robinson, Lost, Castaway. That's like a play off the idea of Robinson Crusoe. The reason why this is important, he's a very blue-collar guy, but early on you can tell he has dreams to go out into the world, right? When he reads about stories about James Cook, as a preacher, he's like, as he's following James Cook's like writings, he's like, okay, this island doesn't have a gospel. This island has never heard about Jesus. This island doesn't have a church. Da, da, da. You know, so he's already thinking at a young age, like, wow, look at all these places that don't have the gospel. So that's him. Next slide. Now, this is Dorothy. This is from the movie. All right, this is not what she looked like. Okay, this is just an actress. Dorothy Carey, born to a poor family and was illiterate. Grew up in a dissenters congregational church. This is important. In England, there is the main church, which is called the Anglican Church. Okay, the Anglican Church basically means Church of England. If you're not part of the Anglican Church, guess what you are? A dissenter. Right? If you're like a Protestant, but you're not part of the English Church, you're a dissenter. Great example. America was founded by Puritans. Why did they flee England? Religious persecution. The Puritans were just one group. There were tons of other groups that fled England. So if you were a dissenter, there are a couple things that happen to you. First of all, you're persecuted. All right. Second of all, a lot of jobs will be close to you. Third, a lot of education can be close to you. So the fact that she grew up in basically like a dissenter's church kind of shows you what her background probably was. So she's like, by nature, growing up knowing that you're a rebel makes you rebellious. That should be kind of obvious. Basically, because your entire life, you ask your mom, like, how come we can't go to such and such? Like, oh, because we're dissenters. Like, okay. Like, how come we can't have money? Like, oh, because we're dissenters. You know, like, okay. And so you grew up with kind of this rebellious attitude, and like, you wonder why you're poor. Well, it's because you're dissenters. That's going to play into her personality a lot, right? Dorothy Carey and William Carey are same in a lot of ways because they're both poor. She's illiterate, right? So, and most women back in the days were, right? A lot more men knew how to read than women knew how to read. But in terms of background, William and Dorothy were kind of similar in a lot of ways, right? Because he's kind of like rebellious out there. He wants to go out, change the world a little bit, and she's kind of a dissenter. So, if I was like, you know, say they were here at San Diego and they came to our church, and William's like, hey, should I go out with Dorothy? I'm like, yeah, why not? No, that seems like it could work out. Because at face value, it seems like you guys have similar backgrounds. At face value, it's like, yeah, you guys have similar upbringings, you guys probably have similar goals and stuff like that, so why not? But here's the tricky part. Just because you're from the same place, the same kind of upbringing, does not necessarily mean your 10-year plan looking down the road looks the same. I'm going to show you that in a second. Because early hardships. So they get together, they get married. First year, right? This is like, 70s, 60s. They lose a baby girl with fever early in their marriage. The same fever caused William to go bald at 21. So when you look at pictures of William Carey, the reason why he's bald is the fever that took his kid and then him. This is important. This is going to shape their life now. So they lose a daughter really early on, right, in their marriage. He later becomes a Baptist pastor and a part-time shoemaker, and he uses little money to buy used books. I put this in order. You lose a daughter to fever. right? You go both with the same thing. A lot of people at that point start to like, okay, I'm gonna start focusing on my health. I'm gonna start focusing on my family, making sure that we're taking care of stuff like that. We have some kind of household security. A Baptist pastor is a dissenter pastor. You don't make very much money. All right, his congregation was really, really poor. He has to work as a shoemaker part-time because he wasn't getting paid enough from the congregation. He's poor, and when he has money left over, he buys books. At this point, you should be thinking, you just lost a baby girl to fever. All right, and that fever scars you forever for the rest of your life. Okay? And when you get any little bit of money from your job, use it to buy books, that should clue you in that there's going to be some tension in the family. When he sought to be ordained, they said he was a colorless preacher and they told him to try again in 2 years. Another hardship now. He likes books, he likes preaching, he likes to serve the church. But even then, people are telling him, hey, you're not that interesting as a preacher. You're kind of blue collar, what you say is kind of just okay, that's obvious. And so he tries to become ordained, trying to go up in the church, and they're like, no, we don't think you're a good minister. And so what happens to guys when they're driven, but people tell you that you're terrible? He learns Greek, Latin, Hebrew, French, Dutch, and Italian in his spare time. How many of you know 3 languages? Okay, and you guys are UCSD grads like that. Greek, Latin, Hebrew, French. These aren't even, some of these are dead languages, okay? Greek and Hebrew are dead languages at this point. Or at least ancient Greek. Greek, Latin, Hebrew, French, Dutch, and Italian. This guy is driven and he's smart. He might not be mathematically smart or engineering smart, but he's language smart. So if you wouldn't care at this point, this is what you see. I like to study. People tell me that I am not colorful, I'm not interesting as a preacher. Fine, I'm gonna work harder. I'm gonna buy more books, I'm gonna work even harder, I'm gonna learn a bunch of languages, right? I'm gonna get even better at this. Now his household, right, what's going on in his personal life is, your daughter just died. All right, and he's gonna get a bunch of kids later. Why don't you take care of the family? I know you have this drive to be this awesome preacher and minister, right? But I just want to let you know there's a crisis going on in your family. Your family life is not happy and secure, and everything's not okay right now. 4 more children were born to him during this time that William was preaching and studying. If you're working full time as a pastor and you're working part time as a shoemaker, how much time do you think you have for your kids? It's obvious, right? So you can kind of see where his priorities start to go. The reason why I put up this, they denied him ordination, because I think that's important. Because as a guy, especially when a guy is driven, I can see why he works so hard. Because to be passionate about something and have someone tell you that you can't do it because you're not good enough, man, that fires you up, right? Especially if you really want to do it. You just get oh, fine, you don't think I'm good enough? Watch me work harder. So I'm not going to say well, he's obsessed because he's just a bad person. I mean, as a guy, that's fighting words. People tell you you're not smart enough to do this. And so I understand why he worked so hard, why he picked up all these languages. It's because he's you know what, if you don't think I can do this, I'm going to show you by my hard work. The problem is this right here. 1 kid dies, 4 more come. So his family life, right, at this point, becomes a huge, huge burden and responsibility. At the same time, he's driven to different things. This is going to be the start of something that you're going to start to see in their life as we go through the study. Go ahead. All right, and I do blue and red so you guys can see. This is her side, this is his side. So he comes against a lot of opposition as he pushed other ministers to go on missions. Remember, I told you in his early life, he likes James Cook and all his adventures and stuff like that. And so he's already planning his early life. Okay, this island right here, New Zealand, no gospel. This Australia, no gospel. These outlying islands, no gospel. And so he's saying if no one's going to go preach the gospel, right, how are they ever going to hear about Jesus? So in England this time, England is a world sea power, right? They can go wherever they want to. So he's basically saying to his other ministers, let's go. Let's go on missions. They know the Catholics have been going out to America and stuff like that, doing their missions. But the Protestants at this point haven't done any missions. So he's saying to the other ministers, why don't we go? We can't let the Catholics just set their missions everywhere, right? And there's tons of islands not even being reached by anybody. So why don't we go? There is a thing happening at this time. Let me tell you what that thing is called. Hyper, meaning like extreme, super ridiculous. Hyper-Calvinism. What hyper-Calvinism is, right, and it's not Calvinism as we know it because that prefix hyper clues you into something. Hyper-Calvinism is the misunderstanding that if God is sovereign, He will do everything without the help of people. Okay, without the help of people. So one of the things that he was challenged by with the other ministers is like, okay, you think you're so smart, William Carey? You think you're such a great theologian? Well, if you believe in a sovereign God, then you should also believe that God can reach those islands without your help. Right? Because if God is sovereign, He wants them to be saved, they'll be saved. They don't need your help. Why did they need little William Carey, shoemaker, to go out and preach the gospel? You're not good enough to be a minister here. What makes you think you're good enough to be a minister there? So a bunch of opposition to that. And hyper-Calvinism was one of those reasons. Because people were like, well, God doesn't need your help. Why do you have to go? So he writes a book, Changing the Way People Think of Missions. This book's a really long time. You can look it up later. This book is like arguments for the conversion of the heathen through the propagation of the gospel or something like that. Something ridiculously long. But basically his point is, when you look at Scripture, God is sovereign and God uses people. When you look at Scripture, every time God wants to do something, He uses people to do it. Book of the Prophets. I want my people to return to me. Sends the prophets. I want my people to be led. He raises up kings. I want people to write down the Gospels, right? The Bible itself. Paul, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. You know what I'm saying? Like, people write things. People do things for God. He makes this whole argument that people are what God uses to accomplish His purposes in the world. He's not a very smart guy. He's not super colorful. His book is a success. A bunch of people are on board. But a bunch of people are like, you know what, hyper-Calvinism doesn't make sense. What you just wrote makes a lot of sense. All right, we believe in you. Founds the First Baptist Missionary Society. The First Baptist Missionary Society. Whenever you do the first of anything, is it little work or hard work?
Hard work.
There's a saying I want you guys to know, because it's a challenge to my life, okay? There's a saying that says, pioneers get slaughtered, settlers prosper. Pioneers get slaughtered, settlers prosper. Meaning that if you're the first one to do anything, it's going to be like painful. It's going to feel like slaughter. Okay? But that's kind of what guy William Carey is. He's kind of a trailblazer in a lot of ways. He founds the First Baptist Missionary Society. Not only does he convince people to go on missions, but he actually comes up with the first society. So he gets a bunch of supporters together. They start raising funds for missionaries. And then he starts getting people getting ready to go overseas. And so at this time in his life, I mean, he's riding high. Not only did he refute all the arguments of people who are smarter than him, he writes a book, right, that it becomes really popular, and he founds a missionary society. So, I mean, he's riding high professionally. Let's look at her side. This is what's going on at home, though. The youngest daughter just died. All right, they have a bunch of kids die at this time. She was pregnant during this time, and she was depressed because she's pregnant and she just had a daughter die. The church also wanted William to stay since they would lose a pastor and it was so hard to find one. Remember, they're dissenters. Baptists are dissenters in England. It's not easy to find a person who wants to pastor a church that is known as like a rebellious church. Especially when your salary is like $5 a year or whatever it is. Okay, it's like super low. So their church doesn't want them to go either. You have to look at history through this lens. What if you were there? Like if they were in our small groups or our YA fellowships or whatever, right? How would you counsel that couple? Right, this husband, he's riding high. I mean, he's way above his ability at this point. He's like finding missionary societies, like writing books and all this stuff. At the same time, their kids are dying at home. They have a bunch of kids, like 2 of them just died, and she's pregnant again. And their church doesn't want them to go. Like it's like Harvest. We don't want them to go. Right, it's like, hey, we keep having to find new pastors and it sucks, and no one likes to pastor here. Like, don't go. So there's a lot of pressure. And when you read Dorothy Carey, you feel like you have a right to put pressure on him. I mean, if you're like the father and your kids are dying, you know, like, shouldn't there be a little urgency to take care of your family? They had already lived in 4 different places, and William had tried 8 different jobs. I told you that he was a shoemaker. He also tried to be a schoolmaster. He was terrible at it. All right, as a schoolmaster, he couldn't exact discipline, so he was terrible at it. He was like a deacon. He was like, you know, a pastor at a different church, and he went to a different church. And then as he's pastoring different places, they're moving. So early on in their marriage, they moved to 4 different places. You know, I mean, if you're guys, you know this, and if you're girls who know guys, you know this. Some guys just have a lot of interest. They have interest for like 4 days. You know, they have interest like, dude, David, like, come over. I'm like, what? I'm really into sea monkeys. I'm like, what? Use that as a stupid example. He's like, dude, this is so cool. I'm gonna get like 20,000 sea monkey things. Like, all right, well, I'll have my friend move some stuff around because he was getting married, and I go to his garage, and then I look at his stuff. I'm like, do you snowboard? He said snowboard. I'm like, no, I did it once. I'm like, you golf? Like, I did it once. I'm like, you play tennis? Like, no, I did that once. You know, I'm like, because this guy's like 30, 32, and so when you're young enough for that long, just so you know, your first time doing things, you're like, oh, cool, I want to do it too, and then you start taking it up. That's a small thing because that's just like you spent, you know, $100. You know, if your doctor's that much money. 8 different jobs is a big thing. So, like, Natalie is married. Okay, if Pastor Nick one day is like, Natalie, you know what I really want to be? Shoemaker. All right, Nike called me up and they want me to help design shoes. I'm gonna do that. And then next time we see you, he's like, oh, what's Pastor Nick doing? Oh, he's designing water skis. And you're like, what? And the next year is like, what do you do now? Oh, he collects trash. If you would counsel someone like that, you would say, find something you're good at, settle down, don't, keep messing around. You gotta remember, at this point, William Carey was still really young. So there's reasons to suspect his motives. Like, great, you're doing a great job, all that stuff, you're still really young. So the things you want to do now might not be the things you want to do later. Okay? So I want to point this out. Dorothy Carey has a good reason to like, hey, William, you're kind of crazy. What you're doing is great, God's work and all that stuff. Like, these islands are going to hear about Jesus and all that stuff. At the same time, you're young, you're not that intelligent, right? Like, just, objectively speaking, you're not academically intelligent. And you've already tried a bunch of things you were not good at. Like, you got the job, but then afterwards you realized you weren't good at it. So, of course, what happens next? The plan. William's like, you know what? Let's do this. First Mission Society, I'm going to go to England, or I'm going to India. Here's the plan. Dorothy doesn't want him to go, but they settle on this. William goes with her 8-year-old son. She's like, I don't want you to go, but let's do this. We have a bunch of children. You take our oldest to India. 3 years later, once you get a home, once you get settled down, we'll go with you. So it's kind of a compromise in some ways. It's basically saying, okay, if you want to try this, let's try this. Let's do it this way. I don't want to leave because we keep losing babies and like it's not cool when a parent loses the child. Our church wants us to stay and all that stuff, but you want to go. Let's split up for 3 years. If it works out, 3 years later I'll join you. Right? You have a home ready, and then I'll feel more settled. I'll feel like our family has a chance of surviving. Okay, and then we'll do that. Of course, what does he do? William, he has a missionary companion named Thomas. They guilt trip Dorothy into going. Let me tell you something about Thomas, first of all. So Thomas, okay, he has good intentions. He wants to go to India and be a missionary. Part of the reason why he wants to leave also, right, you find out from like historical accounts, Thomas is in debt. Right? Thomas is in debt to a lot of creditors, and he's actually fleeing creditors. Okay? So this little missionary band, first of all, is a little suspect. It's suspect for two things. First of all, William is not that well trained. For your first missionary, father in modern missions, you kind of want a guy who was a little bit more well trained. You kind of want a guy who was a little bit smart, who was good at least in England before he goes to India, right? You're sending a guy who couldn't even survive in England, and you're saying, you know what? But you really do well in India. Like that's a little suspect. And Thomas, he's basically running from creditors, and so. I don't know if his character's in question, but at least his financial situation is in question, and he needs to kind of take care of that first. But whatever, he's fleeing to India. Their initial boat to India gets stopped. There's delays happen, and then William sees it as a chance, like maybe this is God's providence saying, "Hey, here's my chance for my wife to go." He comes back home. He's like, "Hey, wife, look, the boat got delayed, but here's a second chance for you to go." Thomas basically says to Dorothy, if you don't go, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Because William will become one of the greatest missionaries, and like he'll do God's work, and you'll be sitting here in England, and you'll always wonder, like what would have happened if I went with him? And then people will remember you as that woman who didn't support her husband and who was like afraid and fearful. And then, how will history remember you? That's essentially what happened. Okay, if you read the letters and stuff like that, it was not like godly, like, you know what, let me encourage you to like be a super awesome missionary and just endure it. They basically say, hey, look, you know what, if you do this, it's sinful. You should be following your husband. Remember what time period it's in, late 1700s England, okay? So other wives follow their husbands. How come you're not following their husband? Other wives, like, go to India. And by this time, remember, in Britain and India are trading. So there are merchant wives. There are a lot of wives that go with their husbands to trade in India and China, places like that. So there is a precedent for it. So Tom's like, all these wives and merchants go to India. It's not a big problem. What's the big deal? Guilt tripper. And of course, on arrival, they move around frequently, suffer poverty, disease, and culture shock. Missions is not this romantic thing, or like when you go overseas, all of a sudden all your problems go away. They don't. Right? I don't want to make you think that like following God is an easy thing. Following God has never, ever, ever been an easy thing. Right? It's not like storybooks and then they sail into the sunset and everyone gets saved. For about the first 7 years when they're in India, no one gets saved. No one gets saved. William basically goes there and no one gets saved. They move around frequently. When you're a preacher and you want to share the gospel and no one gets saved, what do? You move to a different place. You try something else. You try something else. You try something else. 7 years, no one gets saved. And during this time, again, William's not a smart guy, right? You're poor in England. Guess where you're going to be in India? You're going to be poor, okay? What makes you think you're going to be rich? There's nothing that makes you, to make you think that. He tries to be like, different odd jobs, stuff like that. And guess what? They're poor in India too. The difference is that India is really, really hot. Okay? India is really, really hot, and there's diseases that they're not used to because they're English. They don't have that antibodies and all that stuff. So there's a bunch of disease. Guess what? People in India, they don't speak English. Some of the upper class people will start learning English, right? Because the British are always there. But a lot of people they talk to don't speak English. They don't have British customs. You guys have seen the British dress, okay? And you guys have seen Indian people even dressed today. It's very different. All right? If you had British food, it's like bland. If you live your entire life on bland food and you eat curries every day, right, you basically have a heart attack. Okay? There's culture shock. It's hard. I mean, I want to get this point clear because as Asian Americans, you guys are somewhat used to different cultures because you guys grew up in two cultures. You are a poor English person. They're not even in London. Remember, he grew up outside London. So if you're in London, you see people of other cultures. If they grew up in a little town, right, where they've probably never seen an Indian person. They've probably never seen a black person. Probably never seen a Chinese person. Never seen a Hispanic person. And now, the moment you wake up, everyone is a different skin color than you. Everyone eats different food than you. Everyone speaks a different language than you. That is a crazy amount of culture shock. Now, William Carey, this is what he's always wanted to do. So is he suffering? Yeah, he's suffering, but he always wanted to do this. If you're Dorothy Carey, how do you feel right now? She didn't even want to go. She was guilt-tripped into this. She basically shows up because like, oh, I don't want to be that woman, Dave Passon talk about in like 200 years. I'm not going. And so she's there, and she's like, okay, yeah, that's what I thought, right? We're poor, there's disease everywhere, and it sucks. That's what happens next. It doesn't get better. They have another daughter, Kitty. She marries an Englishman in Nevada. The reason why this is important, if you're Dorothy Carey, you've lost a lot of children to disease. Now, when your daughter marries an Englishman and she stays settled in one place, and this is not the age of like, I can see you on Thanksgiving, you just fly over. You basically lost another daughter. You didn't lose her to death, but you basically aren't going to see her again. So she loses a daughter basically to marriage. She marries an English guy in India, and okay, that's it. Hands off, you're now his wife, I'm never going to see you again. So she basically loses another daughter. The 5-year-old Peter dies of dysentery. He's lost 2 kids to fever, now you're going to lose another one to dysentery. This, by the way, this dysentery not only affects their son, but it hits them too. So while as their son is like dying and then dies, they also have dysentery. In India, there's a lot of Muslims, a lot of like Hindus and stuff like that. They can't find anyone to bury Peter. Because a lot of the Muslims don't want to touch a dead body, and a lot of the Hindus, like it's like unclean. And so they have dysentery. No one wants to help them have a proper funeral. While they have dysentery, they bury their son themselves. Let me tell you, I don't know because it's 200 years before, and I don't have kids, but that's got to be a traumatic experience. To have your kid die of a disease that you also have. We had Helen's, memorial was yesterday. Hundreds of people showed up. Hundreds of people said, "We're sorry for your loss. Like, hey, we want to encourage you as a family." Now, William and Dorothy Carey lost their son. No one shows up because all their friends are back in England. They can't have a proper burial because the Muslims and the Hindus don't want to bury their kid. They still have dysentery. They bury their own son. That is a traumatic experience. All right, in a history book, it's just like a line, right? But as human beings, I want you to think about that. You're in a new country. People warned you it's going to be crazy. You bury your son to dysentery. You have it yourself. So while you're mourning your kid, you still have dysentery. So at this point, what do normal people want to do? We're done. Let's go home. Okay, this plan has failed, right? We're putting our cut out for this. So maybe someone stronger, someone more educated, can come and do this later. So this is what Dorothy does. She writes to Thomas that William is being abusive. All right. She basically starts going crazy at this point. She basically writes to Thomas, who's also probably in Calcutta or something like that. And she writes, okay, William is being abusive. Now, we don't know if he's actually abusive, but we know from Thomas's letter and Thomas's experience with Dorothy that he's like, okay, I think Dorothy's kind of just going crazy. Like, William's probably not beating her. He's probably not doing stuff, but he basically tells Dorothy, hey, I don't think he's being abusive. I think you need to kind of suck it up a little bit. So, when we tell someone to suck it up, guess what happens? She later becomes violent. It was forced to be confined to her room. Later on, remember, William founded the first Baptist Missionary Society. As other missionaries started getting ready to come over, William starts to prepare a team for them in India. And so other missionaries come, and now he has a team. There's actually, you can Google this later, the Serampore Trio. This actually later becomes a famous missionary team. Serampore is the area they're in. A bunch of other missionaries come and to support them, and all of a sudden, ministry starts going really well. All right, William's oldest son Felix converts the first Indian to Christ and baptizes in the river Ganges in India, and so people are getting saved. He starts translating a bunch of stuff into Indian, and like people are just going crazy. It's awesome times. At the same time, Dorothy is seeing this, and Dorothy's still upset. Dorothy's like, that's great, you have all these missionaries now. That's great that you're doing a lot of God's work. But we lost a bunch of children, and I have reason to believe that we're going to get sick again in the future, and the next time we get sick, we might never recover. And so she becomes violent. Like, she becomes like literally, Dorothy's a psychiatrist during that time, so we don't know exactly what she had. But she basically starts hitting people, and like the historical accounts of her, they basically lock her into her room, and in her room she's like yelling. She's like yelling at the walls, like yelling at everybody, just like being like obscene. And like other missionaries start to worry about her and like what's gonna happen to her and all that stuff. Later, she dies. Now, what's important is not the fact, everyone dies, okay? Especially when you go overseas, like your life expectancy is shorter. But what's remarkable is this. William remarried 6 months later. To a Danish countess he personally baptized. Now, the reason why that's a big deal, obviously there's obvious reasons for that. How do you remarry 6 months later after your wife dies? Like you just met somebody right away and then you got engaged. So there's a little bit of kind of like, all right, were you guys kind of like more than friends, or like maybe you start to separate from your wife already, mentally you start separating from your wife already. This actually becomes a really big deal. The other missionaries are not just like, okay, cool, whatever. They actually sign a petition to tell them, do not marry this woman. The other missionaries, right, the Serampore Trio, actually tell them, look, here's a petition, we all signed it. We don't want you to marry her. It's not because she's a bad person, it's not because she's just done bad things. But they're like, this doesn't look good. The fact that your wife just died, and you're remarrying, you know. I put this word up in quotes, domestic affliction. Towards the end of Dorothy's life, when William writes back to England, he doesn't write about his wife anymore. He writes about his domestic affliction. Those are his words. Domestic affliction. Here's the practical advice now in dating. A good relationship is when you two are different people, not the same people, different people, striving towards similar goals. Not that she should be a shoemaker, not that she should be a preacher, but you guys have a similar vision of what your life wants, looks like. You guys want to preach the gospel together, right? For him, it looks like being a pastor. For her, it looks like running small groups, things like that. When something is not going well is when you guys are basically fighting, right? You guys are fighting over goals. Like, hey, I'm trying to go this way, you're trying to go this way, and you're fighting. And you're basically trying to say, like, hey, can we compromise? Like, okay, I'll do this, or I'll do this. The worst situation is, not only are you fighting, but you're actively trying to inflict harm on the other person. Right? Best case scenario, travel in the same direction. Bad case scenario is you guys are infighting about where you're going. Worst case scenario is not only are you trying to fight about what direction you're going in, but you're actually trying to harm the other person. So here's what I read into his words, domestic affliction. What I read into that is saying, he's actively trying to confine her, right? And I say confine because he's not really trying to help her anymore. He's like, okay, that's it. You're going crazy. I can't help you. I'm not super educated. I don't know how to counsel you. What does she do? Violent outbreaks. Now, at this point, she tries to hurt people. Not only are they just fighting with the words, but they're literally physically fighting. And so he gets to the point where he calls her a domestic affliction. Like Paul says, I have a thorn in my side. He literally sees his wife as a thorn in his side. And this is what we learn about relationships, right? This is the road we don't want to go down. Because worst case scenario is when you and your wife are actually fighting physically with each other, verbally fighting with each other. And you can see that is, he marries 6 months later. He's actually married to the Danish countess for about 13 years. And then when she dies, he writes that a part of me has also died. A part of me will never recover. So his second marriage actually works out really, really well. Right, his second marriage, she becomes a great help to him in ministry and all this stuff. But the problem is that, what does it say about your character? What does that say about your character that you made your first wife basically go crazy? And then, even the way you write back to her, and the letters we have today, domestic affliction. Next slide. Okay. I point this out because it's important, because William Carey is not a bad person. All right, and there's a lot of, the reason why we name libraries after him and schools after him is because he was an amazing missionary. He became a professor. All right, this guy probably barely graduated high school. Became a professor of Oriental languages. He mastered Sanskrit, Marathi, and Bengali. When he gets appointed by the consul governor or whatever in Calcutta, he actually has to look up how to be a college professor. He has to read books on how do I teach a class, all right? Because he has no academic background. So he basically becomes a professor overnight. That is a huge thing for a shoemaker. Not only that, translate the Bible into 40 different languages and dialects. We have Google today. We have courses you can take in 3 months. I dare you to try to do the Bible in 4 different languages. I dare you. He basically has to, in his own free time, get as many books as he can, sit down with no help from other people, because no one else knows how to do this, right? Maybe some locals who don't know how to translate. And he learns how to do this by himself. 40 different languages and dialects. The reason why I call him the father of modern missionary, and not just a pioneer, is he literally opens the door of India and all surrounding places for missions. Because the moment you get the Bible translated, guess what? The people after you start preaching. Because before this, how do you preach? Let me tell you about Jesus. Open your Bible to it's in English. Well, let me just tell you a story with stick figures. He basically opens the door to every missionary after him. The first American missionaries, Adoniram Judson and Ann Judson, go under William Carey. He literally pioneers everything in India. Opens mission stations and schools. As more and more people come, he actually is a great organizer. All right. India is a huge place, so he goes to different cities and he says, "Okay, we bought this house. when missionaries come, we're going to go ahead and work here. These are some partners we have here. And then whenever people come, we can start placing them. Whenever we have school teachers come over, look, you guys know how to teach kids in England? Teach these kids. These kids want to know about the Gospels. These kids want to know about Bible stories. Go and teach them. He does that all himself. And he's never done this before. In England, he fails as a schoolmaster. Right? He couldn't do it in England, and now he's doing it in India. And he doesn't just do one school, he does multiple schools. So as a missionary, he's an amazing guy. He becomes an expert on horticulture and agriculture. I mean, I think this is ridiculous. He basically learns how to plant stuff in India. He basically learns farming in India. This fool doesn't really know farming in like the UK, but all of a sudden in India he becomes an expert. Like other English people are talking to him because remember in India they're growing tea and all that stuff, right? He becomes an expert on it. So much so that even like other like executives and stuff like that are talking to him like, how do I improve my agriculture? How do I improve my garden and stuff like that? So he becomes a really, really remarkable guy. So that's why I'm trying to show you, being successful in one area does not necessarily carry over into other areas. Here's the thing with godliness, okay? Because you're a pastor does not default you into having a good marriage relationship. Because you're a worship leader does not default you into being nice to women. Because you're a deacon, a small group leader, or whatever, missionary, all right? You never default into godliness. Holiness is not something that like, okay, people think you're a great person, that means you're great in everything. That's not how holiness works. Lessons learned. Here's how you work in a relationship. Number one, we have to understand what God's called us to. And this is what I was saying about you don't default into it. If you don't default into having a good relationship, then what do you do first of all? You have to figure out what has God called us to. And I don't mean like I'm called to be a doctor, I'm called to be a da-da-da. You have to figure out what do you really value in life. All right, this is the number one thing with dating. Okay, you gotta really figure out what your values are. I had a friend at LA Fitness. He was working as a trainer. He was getting paid $10 an hour. And he was dating somebody. He was going to community college. He was dating somebody. And I'm like, "Who's your girlfriend?" It's like, "Oh, it's such and such." It's like, "Oh, she's a nice girl." It's like, "Yeah, her parents own a pharmaceutical company." I'm like, wait, say that again. Her parents own a pharmaceutical company and you're a trainer? It's like, yeah. I'm like, what do you want to do after college? It's like, oh, maybe we want to do CAD or maybe just more training and stuff, right? I'm like, so you don't know what you want to do with your life, right? And he's like 26, 27, right? And he's like, no, not really. And I'm like, wait. And her parents own a pharmaceutical. He's like, yeah. I'm like, this might not work out. And here's why I say that. All right, and I think it didn't work out. I see them on Facebook and they're not together anymore. But can it work out? It can, right? Here's why I think it didn't work out, or why a lot of times that kind of stuff doesn't work out. It's about values, right? It's about what my friend was a trainer. What are his values? It's kind of just like I just want to get by. I just want to have a good time. I want to get a job that pays a paycheck, and then hang out with my friends. And there's nothing wrong with that, and a lot of us do that. A lot of us just want to get a job, be in our cities or communities, and just have children and stuff like that. Now, if her parents own a pharmaceutical company, are they lazy or are they driven? That's an obvious thing. So, for their parents, who do you want your daughter to marry? Someone's also driven. And this is what I'm talking about in values. In a dating relationship, it's not important like, hey, that's why I love it, like when dating websites are like, what movies do you like? Like, I like this. I like this movie too. What kind of music you like? I like this music too. That doesn't mean anything. Okay, it can, but it usually doesn't. What values is that how do I see myself as a person? So, for example, in 10 years, right, I would like to ... because I believe in ... So, I use the example of the girl, her parents own a pharmaceutical. Her parents' dreams for her at least must be, in 10 years, I want you to get an advanced degree so that you can do something with your life, right? Be a manager or something, own something, produce something, right? Like lead something. Your value basically is professional excellence. If you work as a personal trainer, it's not all trainers, but a lot of them. What are your values in life? I want to have a good time. I just want to be in shape. I want to go to the beach. Right, just kind of hang out. And those are not necessarily bad values. I'm sure you can find other people with the same values. But those value sets clash. So in church life, this one comes up a lot, actually. You see people who want to do ministry, right? Who want to lead worship, who want to lead small groups, things like that. And you see someone who's also Christian, but they don't want to do that. Right? They kind of just I just kind of want to be part of the church. Why can't I just help out every 2 weeks or something like that? Those value sets will clash. And I'm not saying any of them are good people or bad people, right? So I try to show William Carey, just because he did all these things doesn't make him a good person. What that says that you got to figure out what has God called you to. Not everyone's called to lead a worship team or a church like that. That's obvious. But you got to figure that out when you're dating. All right? What are you really seeking in life? How's the thing you want to glorify God? Here's what I would say. If I was counseling William Carey, and he's in his 20s, all right, and he got married at 19, I would say don't get married. Do not get married. All right. If I grew up with him and had authority in his life and stuff, and respect in his life, I would say, look at where your life is leading you. I would go to his apartment or whatever and be like, you have little boats with flags on them and stuff like that. Okay, you obviously don't want to be in England. You obviously are not happy with what it is right here, right? Don't get married. Wait. If you want to go overseas, go overseas first and then see what happens. Why get married, make your wife think that you're going to stay here, and then guilt trip her into going to India? That's messed up. Why can't you just stay single? Control yourself for a few years, go to India, and then reevaluate. Because guess what happens? He does. He goes to India, someone gets converted, he has a happy marriage. Right? When he gets married to someone he baptized, it's a great marriage. And everyone says it's a great marriage. He helps him a lot in his life. So that ended up working out. So why did his first marriage not work out? What are we really seeking in life? Because as a husband, did he serve his wife's interests? If he did, you'd find me a letter that shows he did. All right, you can't really find any historical evidence that says at any point he really had his wife's interest in mind. So how do you know he called it singleness? That might be obvious evidence. This is a side tangent, practical advice. When people ask, how do I know God is calling me to date this person or be single or marry this person? All right, let me tell you how God speaks. Scripture, community, accountability, through the pastor, through your parents, right? Through your personal experiences, right? Through your own devotional life. A lot of people and I've heard this, I've been in the church long enough, we're like, well, my church doesn't think I should date this person, but I do. I'm like, what does your pastor say? I think it's a bad idea. Is he Christian? No. So what does the Bible say about that? Yeah, but I just have a strong feeling. I'm like, so you're telling me that God is lying to your church, God is lying to your pastor, and God is lying through the Bible. But he's not lying when he talks directly to you. That's true. Everything else is a lie, though. God just lies in all other areas, except when he talks to you. That's how God speaks. If you believe that other Christians have the Holy Spirit, if you believe that the Bible is inspired by God, right? If you believe that people in spiritual authority are given that authority by God, not by voting, all right, or by the church that's hired somebody, then you have to believe that people's advice to you means something. It shouldn't be the definitive word, okay? Because people are fallible, but it should mean something to you. Are you bearing the burden of others? Because leaders don't call others a burden; they see hardship as opportunity. It's advice for guys. How do you know if you're ready to date? If you call someone a domestic affliction, you're probably not ready to date. Because here's how I think William Carey saw it. Okay, our kids are dying. Get over it. We lost 2 kids. I went bald. You know what? Someone's got to get over it. His wife comes up to him, hey, I'm not happy. All right, I'm really, really suffering. And he's like, let me tell you how I handled it. I got over it. That's not leadership. If your idea of leadership is basically to go back at a person and be like, why aren't you stronger? Why aren't you smarter? Why can't you get over it? How come you're not more Christian? How come you can't da-da-da? And I'm telling you, you're not ready yet to date. You're not ready to lead a family. Because I think, we're going to see examples of this later on in these series. that when we see the good husbands, right? I'm going to show you some good husbands throughout history. What they do is when their family faces hardship, they take it as their own hardship. They take it as, here is an opportunity for me to really, not just like, hey, when I got married, they said I'm the head of the household, but to actually show that I'm the head of the household. To show by my actions, I'm the head of the household. All right, to take it on myself personally to make sure this is done. Here's a great analogy for guys. There's a lot of guys in this classroom. You watch sports, okay? Good quarterbacks. Games at the last score, okay? And you guys are going down the field, and you command the offense, right? And then you throw it, and then someone drops it. Here's what a good quarterback does. He looks down, and you see good they're thinking, right? They're looking over the place and they're thinking like, what did I screw up? Bad quarterbacks are like, why do you suck? Why do you suck? We're trying to win and you suck, right? You are the reason why we're losing. What is the difference? Both those quarterbacks have responsibility. One of them takes it upon himself to make the difference. The other one blames others, and that's the difference, the responsibility. Good leaders and bad leaders both have responsibility. The good leaders are the ones who see, hey, my wife is suffering, let me help relieve her suffering. The bad husbands lock their wives in a room and basically say, you know what, every time I write about you, it's going to be talking trash. I have to make fun of you. Okay? Are you bearing the burden of others? Leaders don't call others a burden. They see hardship as opportunity. I hope you guys took notes. I'm going to open this time up for Q&A. So go ahead and ask questions if you want at this point. Or I can ask me later at lunch. Okay, we'll go to lunch and we can ask me later. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you just for this time where we can gather and to learn about what you've done through history. God, we just believe that you're teaching us even now because we've seen a lot of grace through William and Dorothy Carey's life. And that for William Carey, even though he wasn't very academic, even though he wasn't skilled a lot professionally, he was able to do a lot of things for you. And he was able to lead later on in his life. So Lord, I pray that you would help us all, that we would be able to see our different communities, our different relationships in life as a chance to lead, as a chance to bless and to not take and to curse. And I pray that we would see just each other Christian as just a blessing to us, someone who's been given to us for our holiness. Lord, I pray for maybe people in this room who feel like a Dorothy Carey, who feel neglected, either by their dating relationship or in their singleness, they feel they're neglected by the community. I pray that you would show them grace. I pray that you show everyone in this room grace in being comforted. God, I believe that you are the God of comfort, you're the God of peace, and that you would help us all to understand what it means to be truly taken care of. God, I pray that everyone in this room would enter a relationship that is not abusive, that they'd be able to recognize the signs of abuse, that they'd be able to recognize the signs of a spouse or a dating, a person in a dating relationship who looks like they're going to be abusive in the future. I pray that you would bless this church, that you would help us to have healthy relationships, to be strong and uplifted. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.